There's a lot of NFL mock draft content out there. What makes this video so much better? Well, it might not be, but you're already here, so you might as well stick around and see. Now, there's some conventional agreed upon picks in this mock, as well as a few you might disagree with, so let's get into it. And with the first overall pick of the draft, I do have the Chicago Bears going with Will Anderson Jr., the defensive end, outside linebacker, whatever floats your boat, out of Alabama. Um, there's a real argument to be made for Georgia defensive tackle Jalen Carter here. Obviously, both extremely good defensive line prospects, but I just ended up going with Anderson. Just a insane prospect. Probably would have actually definitely would have gone number one overall last year. Just will be an immediate difference maker off the edge for the team. So yeah, can't really go wrong at this spot. Now, in a pick that shouldn't surprise anybody, second overall, the Texans go with Bryce Young out of Alabama, the quarterback. Now, obviously, Texans are in dire need of a quarterback. The Davis Mills experiment just is not working out. There's an argument to be made for a guy like CJ Stroud here, but overall, Young is just the more polished and more complete prospect, and I can see the Texans pulling the trigger on him here, despite possible concerns over his size. I think this is the pick they will make. They'll get their franchise quarterback here, second overall, and the Texans don't outthink themselves and just take the right guy. Next up, in what should be a no-brainer pick, the Cardinals will go with Jalen Carter, defensive tackle out of Georgia. So, one of the few blue-chip defensive line prospects at the top, Carter should be an immediate difference maker for Arizona, a defensive line that's already pretty thin after J.J. Watt's retirement, and you know how thin it already was. So, this should massively help the Cardinals' defense as a whole, and should just be a very easy pick for their front office and their new defensive-minded head coach, Jonathan Gannon. Now, the fourth overall pick could go a couple different ways. I do have the Colts taking CJ Stroud at quarterback out of Ohio State at this spot. I have seen a lot of mocks where they take Will Levis out of Kentucky, but I'm going with CJ Stroud here. He seems like the far better prospect in my eyes, and I think Indianapolis will probably see that, and I think they will go with him if he's available at fourth overall, although they might be trying to trade up to first overall in real life. However, in this mock, they take the next best prospect available, and they finally end the veteran quarterback carousel. Pick number 5 is where things get interesting because it's all but guaranteed that the top two quarterbacks and top two defensive linemen will be off the board here. But at fifth overall, I have the Seahawks go ahead and taking Tyree Wilson, the defensive end out of Texas Tech. Now, you could make an argument for a guy like Myles Murphy here, maybe even a guy like Brian Bresee, although he's been falling down draft boards. But Wilson is just massive. He's something like 6'6". I want to say like 275 pounds. He could theoretically play inside, but the Seahawks defense needs help, and so they take a humongous, super strong edge rusher who should be a big force on the defensive line, fifth overall. At sixth overall, I have the Lions taking Illinois cornerback Devon Witherspoon, who at this point is probably cornerback one in the class, although that's still up for debate. He allowed something crazy like 1 yard all season in press coverage at Illinois, something ridiculous like that. But yeah, crazy good. Detroit Lions' biggest need by far is their secondary. It's not even close. If they can patch that up, they are looking like a very scary playoff team. But so yeah, they take the arguably the best cornerback on the board. They have their choice of cornerbacks at pick 6, and they go ahead and take Witherspoon to shore up their pass defense. I may catch a little bit of flack for this pick, but here at 7th overall, I decided to go with Will Levis for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, if I was a general manager, would I make this pick? No, probably not. But I can very easily see the team getting desperate and thinking they need a quarterback right here, right now, and just taking him if he's there. If there's an argument to be made for like a tackle, like Paris Johnson, for example, or even like a cornerback, but I can see the team getting desperate and taking Levis here. I'm not sure if it would be a good pick or not, but this is what I think is fairly likely to happen, so I went ahead and mocked it. Myles Murphy is the choice, 8th overall, by the Atlanta Falcons with their pick here. Now, there are a fair amount of questions about Murphy, but you can see that the talent is all there. And I think at this point, the Falcons are probably going to just go ahead and ride with Ritter for a year instead of trying to swing on a guy like Anthony Richardson, who's available. So I have them taking arguably the best defensive end prospect left. I know they took an edge last year, but their defensive line still needs a lot of help. So I have them taking Murphy here and try to develop him and turn him into a big-time pass rusher for the team. Now, in a pick you guys probably saw coming, I have the Panthers taking Anthony Richardson 9th overall. Now, there is an outside chance that they do turn out to just be running with Matt Corral from last year's draft. I don't think so, though, so I have them taking Richardson here. Richardson is a very polarizing prospect, a guy who very clearly has all of the tools to be an elite player in the NFL, but is also just so incredibly raw and would be a wreck to try to start day one. So I would have to imagine maybe they'll re-sign a guy like Sam Darnold or something like that to have Richardson sit behind and develop. I think at this point, Carolina just really has to take whoever's left, and Richardson is that guy. Guy with all the potential in the world, but also a very high chance to not work out. But I think they need a quarterback. This is the guy who's left. They're going to take a big swing. With their 10th overall pick, I have the Eagles selecting Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. So obviously the Eagles are picking this high because they got this draft pick last year in the Chris Olave trade up by the Saints. And they will use this pick to inject some youth and some talent into their secondary. Because their secondary was very good this year, but James Bradberry is a free agent. Even if he isn't, he's 29. And Darius Slay is 32. So they need some young talent if they want to continue to sustain the production of last year. So I have them taking probably the second best cornerback in the class here. It should be a nice replacement for Bradberry, and it's just a perfect fit here at a pick that Philly should be glad to have. With the 11th pick, I have the Tennessee Titans taking Ohio State offensive tackle Paris Johnson Jr. So the Titans' whole offense really needs an upgrade, but for this, I think their priority has to be their offensive line, which, it's kind of the foundation of your offense. And all last year, their offensive line was just Swiss cheese. It was a whole mess through injuries, just terrible play. Longtime tackle Taylor Lewan is likely to be cut this year, and they need an injection of talent. And Paris Johnson is that injection of talent. Now, they could, in theory, look for a guy like Peter Skoronski here, but I think they're probably looking for a true tackle, and of course there are the concerns that Skoronski will play more of a guard in the NFL with his arm length. So yeah, they're going to be taking the first offensive tackle off the board here, and probably offensive tackle 1 in this class, to hopefully bring some stability to their offensive line again. I might catch some flack for this, but at 12th overall, I have the Houston Texans going Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. Now, in my opinion, he is the wide receiver 1 in this class. I think people forget how crazy he went in 2021, 2 years ago, before he had to sit out all this year with an injury. He was just so dominant. At times, he looked like the best receiver in a room with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and that's impressive. I think that, a lot of people have been mocking wide receivers to the Texans at 12. Often it's a guy like Quentin Johnston, but I think that this guy is the wide receiver 1 in this class. I think he's going to be the best in the NFL. So yeah, they need that number 1 wide receiver to pair with their new quarterback Bryce Young, and I think that's Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think he's the guy, and so they're going to take him 12th overall before a team like Green Bay or whoever needs wide receiver snatches him up, and boom, they have their wide receiver 1 of the future. Now, I think this is one of the easier picks in this mock. The New York Jets need offensive line help, and here they take Northwestern offensive lineman Peter Skoronski. So their offensive line has been a weakness of the team. Their whole offense has been, but to work on fixing it, they need to build their offensive line. And to really shore it up, I think Skoronski would be a great pick here. Him and the Jets' first-round pick from a couple years ago, Elijah Vera Tucker, are going to be a pretty good wrecking crew, honestly. I'm excited to watch that if this happens. But yeah, regardless of where he plays, whether that's tackle, guard, or even center or something, I think this will be a very good pick for the Jets. I think that will help build their offensive line, and I think Skoronski is going to be very good in the league regardless of where he's going to play. So yeah, the Jets make a pretty easy pick, yet maybe the best offensive lineman in the draft, and with some versatility. And yeah, Jets front office gonna be pretty happy with this one. Continuing the kind of run on offensive linemen we have here, New England is going to take Georgia offensive tackle Broderick Jones, 14th overall, to help protect whoever they're trotting out at quarterback next year. Now, this is a very promising young tackle and should be a big part of New England's future, assuming he works out. And yeah, New England has a glaring hole, a glaring need at tackle, and Jones should fill that hole pretty nicely, pretty effectively. Easy pick. Now, with the next pick, 15th overall, I have the Green Bay Packers selecting USC wide receiver Jordan Addison. Now, you don't have to be a serious NFL fan to know that Green Bay really needs some wide receivers. Christian Watson is looking pretty good. He's going to be a helpful piece, but they need more. Their pass catching group is very barren, and I see people mock Michael Mayer here a lot, but I think the speedy wide receiver Addison would probably be more helpful, and I have them taking him here 15th overall. So this should inject some life, inject some speed into their wide receiver room. He should form a pretty nice young tandem with Christian Watson. Obviously, last year's second round pick. And I think this would be a great addition for Green Bay and put some life back into their offense. In the middle of the first round, 16th overall, I have the Washington Commanders selecting cornerback Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. Now, this guy is a lot of people's cornerback one in the class, and this could be really good value for Washington if it works out. Porter Jr., obviously, very good prospect. Washington needs to fix up their secondary. And yeah, this just seems like a really great pick. It falls into their laps, and they take him. It should work out really well for both sides. With the 17th overall pick, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers selecting cornerback Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Now, the Steelers need secondary help. Obviously, Minkah Fitzpatrick is very, very good, an extremely good young piece to have around, but Cam Sutton, the cornerback, is a free agent, and past that, is there really anybody? I don't think so. I think the Steelers need help with the pass defense, so they take Smith here, who should be very helpful, beef up their pass defense, and continue to work on their defense. At first, I figured this pick might ruffle some feathers, but recently I've seen it mocked to the Lions more and more often. So, at 18th overall, I do have Detroit selecting Bijan Robinson, the running back out of Texas. Now, if the Lions didn't have multiple second-round picks, I probably wouldn't be okay with making this pick where I am, but they do, so it's alright. So while the Lions had a good rushing attack last year, it's not really sustainable, and this move makes a pretty good amount of sense. Jamal Williams, while being, a gem of a human being and pretty much everyone's favorite NFL player, he's 28. The fact of the matter is that he's 28, and that's old for a running back, and it just isn't going to work to count on him to be your long-term running back one. And DeAndre Swift, we all know that he just can't seem to catch a break. He just can't seem to stay healthy. Now, I know there's plenty of you guys that are going to get mad at me about positional value or something like that, but when there's an elite running back, like Bijan Robinson, it's okay to use a first rounder on him. It's basically, as I see it, 4 years of guaranteed production. Injuries are gonna happen, but he's probably one of the safest running back prospects I can think of, the safest in this draft by far, and he's gonna be insane in the NFL. I don't know for how long, but this guy is really good, and it would take the Lions offense from elite to carry you to a Super Bowl good. This would be scary, and I can totally see Brad Holmes and co. pulling the trigger on Robinson. One pick later, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will take Osiris Torrance, the offensive guard out of Florida. So this guy's arguably offensive guard or interior offensive lineman #1 in this year's class. Tampa Bay their offensive line was pretty good, but Ryan Jensen isn't getting any younger, and they need to put some men next to Tristan Wirfs if they want to continue to work on this offensive line. And I think O'Cyrus Torrence is that guy. Very strong prospect here and should fill a need for the Buccaneers. Next up, 20th overall, I have the Seattle Seahawks taking Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver out of TCU. Now, I know he's a lot of people's wide receiver one, but there are a lot of concerns about him, and I can see him slipping to the third guy off the board, if not worse. We'll really see how this goes on draft day, but here he falls to number 20, and Seattle goes ahead and snaps him up. I know they have defensive needs, but I don't think they'd pass on a guy they might have billed as wide receiver one. They already have a pretty good offense, but they want to make sure it's shored up for the future. Lockett is not getting any younger. And yeah, obviously DK is great. Kenneth Walker is great. They have promising pieces on their offense, but they want to make sure it's secured for the future. And a huge, physical, speedy wide receiver falls into their laps at pick 20, and they just go ahead and take him. They have other picks to shore up the defense, so they can feel okay about go ahead and making this pick. The Miami Dolphins forfeited the 21st overall pick due to tampering violations. With the 22nd overall pick, I have the LA Chargers selecting Zay Flowers, wide receiver out of Boston College. Now, the Chargers are in need of some more juice on offense. Keenan Allen is looking like he might be a potential cap casualty, and even if he isn't, he's 30 years old, so he's not a long-term solution regardless. There's obviously Mike Williams, but you can't just have Mike Williams. You got to have a little more. Justin Herbert needs more weapons, and Zay Flowers is one of those weapons. Their offense needs more of a spark to it, and Flowers should be that spark. In order to compete in the NFL, they're going to need a better offense, and this pick should help them do it. 23rd overall, the Baltimore Ravens select Josh Downs, wide receiver, North Carolina. Now, this realistically probably isn't a pick I would make if I were running a team. I mean, I can't really be sure, but this seems like it could be a little bit of a reach for Downs. We'll see how he is viewed by the time it's the draft, but it might be a little bit of a reach. The Ravens, though, are desperate, and they just snag him here before somebody else can, because their wide receiver room is so incredibly barren, and if they want Lamar Jackson to stay, they need to give him some weapons. So they go ahead and take Josh Downs here to be one of those weapons, because at this point, I have to think they're getting a little bit desperate for receivers. 25th overall, I have the Minnesota Vikings selecting defensive back Brian Branch out of the University of Alabama. Now, Brian Branch is a pretty exciting prospect, actually, and he could conceivably go a lot higher than this in real life, but for this mock, I have him going to the Vikings here. So Branch is listed as a safety, but I call him a defensive back because he can really do it all. He can play, nickel corner. He can just play normal safety. He can just play all around the field. He's kind of a chess piece on defense. And the Vikings, they really need help on defense, especially young help. Their defense in general is very old, and one of their starting safeties, Harrison Smith, could be a cap casualty, and if he isn't, he's, I think, 34. The Vikings, their offense was fine, but their defense was atrocious. And Brian Branch, wherever he slots into it, should be a welcome addition. At pick 25, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Georgia cornerback Kelee Ringo. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Now, Ringo was originally projected as cornerback 1 by most people, but as time has gone on, he's really slipped down draft boards, but not too far, obviously, because he is definitely still a first-round talent. Now, obviously, Tyson Campbell is a pretty good guy for the Jaguars, and they also have Darius Williams, but they still need some more secondary help, so they're going to go ahead and take Ringo here. His kind of slide, you could call it, ends at pick 25, where the Jaguars snap him up to solidify their secondary. One pick later, I do have the New York Giants going with Michael Mayer, I don't know, out of Notre Dame, the tight end. Now, I don't know how popular of a pick this will be, but it seems like a pretty good fit, honestly. All of the premium wide receivers are off the board at this point, so taking one at this spot one of the remaining ones, would just be a massive reach. And this guy is a very good tight end prospect, and he would definitely provide a solid, reliable pass-catching target for Daniel Jones, assuming the team extends him. Now, I know the team does already have tight end Daniel Bellinger, who's been pretty good, but I think together they can form a pretty nice tandem and help, give Daniel Jones some weapons. So Mayer gets taken here at pick 26 by the Giants, and it seems like a pretty good fit to me. At pick 27, I have the Dallas Cowboys selecting Pittsburgh defensive tackle Calijah Kancey. Now, this guy has really risen up draft boards over the last month or so, and rightly so. He's a very good prospect, very high pass rush win rate as an interior defensive lineman, which is very impressive. And yeah, the Cowboys, they need help along their interior defensive line, so they go ahead and pick this guy up in the first round, and he should be a nice addition to their defense and to their team overall. Now, I'm not totally sure how popular this pick is going to be, but at number 28 overall, I have the Buffalo Bills selecting John Michael Schmitz, the center out of Minnesota. Now, the Bills have more needs than you might think as a casual fan, and offensive line is decidedly one of them. The offensive line play all year was just sloppy. It was not great. And I know that, yes, there's an argument to be made for a guy like a tackle here, but I ultimately decided to go with an interior offensive lineman to beef up the trenches for Buffalo. Now, this guy had an outstanding Senior Bowl. Very, very good Senior Bowl. Should be rising up draft boards, and I currently view him as my interior offensive lineman number 2 in this class after O'Cyrus Torrence. So I can very easily see Buffalo go ahead and taking him here before another team snaps him up early in the second, and it should give their offensive line a pretty substantial boost. With the 29th overall selection in the NFL Draft, I have the Cincinnati Bengals selecting Anton Harrison, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Now, obviously, the Bengals had a good year. We know this, but they have a glaring hole at offensive line, a pretty severe need there. And they tried to beef it up this past offseason. It didn't really work. So they still have a big need at tackle. And with this pick, they take arguably the best one left. Now, Harrison, I could see him going a little higher or a little lower than this, but it seems like a pretty good spot for him to go. So the Bengals should hopefully work on patching up their offensive line here and protect Joe Burrow, who they're probably going to re-sign soon. And it just seems like a great fit here. A good tackle prospect for a tackle-needy team. And the Cincinnati Bengals will definitely need a new tackle to help them make that Super Bowl run that they've been trying to make. With the 30th overall selection in the NFL Draft, the Saints, who got this pick from the Broncos in the Sean Payton trade, take Bryan Bresee, defensive tackle out of Clemson. Now, this is a very polarizing figure. I have seen him mocked as high as number 6 to the Lions. Let me just say, he will not go that high. Bryan Bresee is not a top 5, top 10 player. He has talent, but everything about him screams bust. Just the lack of college production and just all the potential questions. But he does have the talent. He has the potential. He was the number 1 overall recruit in the nation coming out of high school. And with the right coaching, I think he can be a great interior defensive lineman here. And so, New Orleans, with this pick that they got recently, is going to take a flyer on him, is going to take him and try to coach him up, try to, take that potential, that talent, and turn him into a great defensive tackle. I think this is as far as he's probably going to slide, late first, early second, because in the modern NFL, teams draft a lot based on potential, probably more than they used to, which is something you see. So yeah, New Orleans is going to go ahead and take Bryan Bresee here out of Clemson to add what hopes to be a commanding presence to their interior defensive line. 31st overall, with the penultimate pick of the 2023 NFL Draft, I have the Eagles selecting Lucas Van Ness, defensive end, Iowa. Now, this guy has just skyrocketed up draft boards. I've seen him going as high as to the Falcons, like in the top 10. This guy has been just shooting up the draft boards. But in this mock, he did fall a little bit to the end of the first round because there was kind of, a run on edges in the beginning, and the teams that need edges, the teams in between there and here just didn't really need edges, so he just kind of ended up slipping this far, where the Eagles, I'm sure, would be more than happy to grab him because he's a pretty exciting player. He's a very interesting prospect, but I think, yes, Philly, their defensive line is pretty old, and if they're not old, they're free agents. So they should be excited to scoop up Van Ness here and add him to their defensive line, injecting some young talent. And yeah, should work out great for everyone. With the final pick of the first round, I have the Kansas City Chiefs selecting Nolan Smith, defensive end, out of Georgia. Now, I know that the Chiefs took a defensive end in the first round last year in George Karlaftis out of Purdue, but they could still use another one. And if Nolan Smith works out, their defensive line could be downright scary with Chris Jones and Karlaftis. So they're going to go ahead and scoop up Smith here. Smith is an interesting prospect. He's got all the potential, only some of the production at this point in his career, but definitely something that the Chiefs would be willing to work on with him. Yeah, very, very interesting edge rusher. A lot of promise there. Fun prospect, and yeah, the Chiefs will gladly take him at the end of the first round to, add a little more oomph to their pass rush. So yeah, my friends, that is going to be the end of the video. I'd love to hear what you thought about the mock draft, what you liked, what you disliked, what you thought was stupid, what you thought I knocked out of the park. Yeah, just let me know on the comments, hit me up on Twitter, whatever works. Stay on the lookout for more NFL, NBA, honestly, whatever. Just keep on the lookout, and I'll see y'all around.